This is a 1958 Cessna 172 powered by a Continental O-300, an engine that played a pivotal role in the growing of general aviation. In this video, I'll explain this engine's significance and take you through a detailed look at the design of this 77-year-old engine. After World War II, general aviation experienced rapid growth. The surplus of military aircraft, thousands of trained pilots returning home, and the romanticization of aviation during the war created ideal conditions for this small sector to quickly expand into one of the largest aviation industries. The demand for light aircraft for recreational flying, business travel and flight training skyrocketed, and companies like Piper, Beechcraft and Cessna were well positioned to capitalize on this by designing and building modern light aircraft. Light, powerful and most importantly reliable engines were needed for this new fleet of general aviation aircraft. Some of the popular existing engines were the Continental 190 cubic inch C-series horizontally opposed engines like the C-75 and C-85, powering the likes of the Urco Ercoupe and Cessna 140. Another was the horizontally opposed four-cylinder Lycoming O-235, powering aircraft like the Piper PA-12 Super Cruiser. The C-85 produced 85 horsepower and the O-235 produced between 100 and 125 horsepower depending on the variant. This wasn't enough power for modern four-seat aircraft. Small and powerful radial engines were available at the time, but their big cross-sections didn't match the sleek design of modern general aviation aircraft. To meet this requirement, Continental developed the C-145, a six-cylinder engine offering the extra power required. The C-145 was based on the C-125 engine first produced in 1945. Both engines shared the same crankcase, but Continental increased the stroke and compression ratio, boosting its power from 125 to 145 horsepower. This engine became the power plant of choice for the brand new, easy-to-fly, four-seat Cessna 170. When the improved 170B model was introduced in 1952, it quickly gained popularity for utility and bush flying. The total number of 170s built exceeded 5,000 aircraft, but this was merely a foreshadowing of what was to come from Cessna. The C-145 also became a useful upgrade on airplanes like the Globe Swift, initially powered by the Continental C-85 or C-125, improving its climb performance and cruise speed. Continental's engine naming system referred to the engine's horsepower. For example, the C-145 produced 145 horsepower. However, the industry commonly used a more descriptive naming standard based on engine type and displacement, like Lycoming's O-235. Continental adopted this system, and with minimal changes, the C-145 became the O-300. In 1956, 9 years after the C-145, now known as the O-300, first went on sale, the engine was as popular as ever. However, by this time, production of the Cessna 170 had ended. It was replaced by what could be considered a nose-wheel-equipped version of the 170B, featuring a square tail fin and powered by the same O-300 engine. And thus was born the most produced aircraft in history, the Cessna 172. This 172 is a 1958 model. An understandable misconception is that the A variant was the first model 172, but the A model was first produced in 1960 when Cessna changed the straight tail to a swept tail. So the pre-A models are usually simply referred to as the straight tail 172. This one was converted to a tail dragger, but of course these were originally nose wheel equipped. The C-145 and O-300 also powered various other aircraft, the most popular being the MAL M4 and the Aeronca sedan. For the next decade, the O-300 powered 172s, helping it gain widespread popularity. As Cessna kept improving the 172 over time, gradually these upgrades increased the weight of the plane and it required more power. By 1968, with the introduction of the I model, Cessna made the decision to switch engines to the Lycoming O-320. The O-320 was a modern, air-cooled, horizontally opposed 4-cylinder engine producing 150 horsepower, 5 more than the O-300 while being about 12 kilograms lighter. With only 4 cylinders, it was also more affordable to maintain. Switching to the O-320 made perfect sense, even though it meant that Continental lost the O-300's most popular platform to Lycoming, their biggest competitor. But Continental had something up their sleeve. They also offered an O-300 in a higher RPM gear-reduced version called the GO-300. By increasing max engine RPM from 2,700 to 3,200 and by raising compression ratio from 7:1 to 7.3:1, the engine produced 175 horsepower. Additionally, with the engine running at 3,200 RPM, the gearbox reduced propeller RPM to 2,400, allowing for larger diameter propellers, which improved propeller efficiency. The GO-300 was chosen to power the Cessna 175 Skylark, which first went on sale in 1958, and although very similar to the 172, the 175 was supposed to be a more premium airplane. The GO-300 engine, however, quickly gained a reputation for being unreliable, which was undeserved to some degree. The gear-reduced engine had stricter operating guidelines than direct-drive engines, and pilots often didn't adhere to this. One example of this was prolonged operation at low RPM, which had to be avoided. This could be viewed as counterintuitive. Surely lower RPM is better for engine longevity. But this was not the case with the GO-300. As a result, the success of the Cessna 175 was very limited, being discontinued after only 5 years of production. But the tarnished reputation of the GO-300 did little to affect the success of the direct-drive O-300 and its C-145 predecessor, with its reliability becoming known as legendary. In fact, the demand for the direct-drive O-300 was high enough for British engine giant Rolls-Royce to produce it under license in the UK. The O-300 had a surprising resurgence in the 1980s when Continental set out to create a modernized aero engine. They developed the IOL-300, also known as the Voyager 300, a liquid-cooled, fuel-injected engine with a 11.4:1 compression ratio, producing upwards of 170 horsepower at a very low brake-specific fuel consumption of 0.375 pounds per horsepower hour. Continental also upgraded their 4-cylinder O-200 in the same manner to create the Voyager 200, one of the engines that powered the first ever non-stop, non-refueled flight around the world in 1986. However, the 6-cylinder IOL-300 was mainly used for testing and never saw production or use in any aircraft. The O-300 is well known for being an exceptionally smooth running engine. So let's have a closer look at the engine, starting with a technical overview before diving deep into its design. The O-300 is an air-cooled, carbureted, wet sump lubricated 6-cylinder engine with a dry weight of 258 pounds. It has a displacement of 4.9 liters thanks to its 4.06-inch bore and its 3.87-inch stroke. That means each cylinder has a displacement of only 0.82 liters. This is fairly small compared to the engine's 4-cylinder competitors. The Lycoming O-320, the engine that virtually made the O-300 obsolete, has a per cylinder displacement of 1.36 liters. The O-300's small per cylinder displacement contributes to its smooth running, but the primary cause lies in its horizontally opposed 6-cylinder layout, a topic we'll delve into in the next section. We simply can't ignore how good this relatively small 6-cylinder engine sounds. Like most piston aviation engines, the O-300 is an overhead valve or pushrod engine. This means the valves, situated in the cylinder head, are driven by a camshaft located inside the engine block. In Continental engines, the camshaft is typically positioned below the crankshaft, whereas in Lycoming engines, it's located above the crankshaft as reflected by the position of the pushrods. When using pushrod operated valves, they usually number 2 per cylinder. The exhaust valves on the O-300 and other Continental engines are solid stem valves, whereas in Lycoming's, valves are sodium filled to assist in cooling the valve. The O-300 also uses flat-headed valves, where Lycoming uses concave intake valves and convex exhaust valves. This is one example of why the O-300 is so reliable. Continental prioritized simplicity above all else, even at the expense of engine efficiency. The O-300 is also a low-stressed engine, meaning it has a low power density, which is the engine's horsepower divided by its displacement. For the O-300, that works out to 0.48 horsepower per cubic inch. While this isn't ideal in terms of efficiency or performance, it contributes to the engine's good reliability. Additionally, being a low compression engine makes the O-300 an ideal candidate to be run on high-octane mogas, the same fuel your car uses, since detonation is much less likely compared to high compression engines. One area where the O-300 particularly excels is with bottom-end reliability, and their bottom ends are generally known for being bulletproof, and many pilots over the years have reported its bottom ends lasting well past the engine's 1,800 hours TBO, often exceeding 3,000 hours. The engine has a 2-piece aluminium crankcase with 6 individual aluminium cylinder heads with steel barrels. The crankshaft design may surprise those unfamiliar with these engines, as it lacks traditional counterweights found in inline and V engines. This is because the opposing pistons and conrods cancel both reciprocating forces and conrod big end rotational imbalance. However, with large per-cylinder displacement generating significant torque, these engines are susceptible to substantial torsional vibration. Torsional vibration is the crankshaft's tendency to twist along its length due to power pulses from the pistons. Since the propeller is the primary load-bearing point, the crankshaft near the furthest pistons experiences the most torsional force. To save weight, vibration dampeners are typically placed only at this point. This dampener balances torsional forces to improve smoothness and reduce component wear. We'll dig deeper into engine balance in the next section. The most likely problems to encounter with the O-300 are typically with the top end, such as stuck valves. However, since it's a 6-cylinder engine, a stuck valve in flight isn't usually critical, though the engine will run rough. In a 4-cylinder engine, a partially dead cylinder is a larger percentage of total power, making it a more serious issue. Fuel consumption in aero engines varies depending on aircraft and pilot, but the O-300's fuel consumption in cruise is typically about 8 gallons per hour at 75% power. However, by throttling back to 65% power and properly leaning the mixture, fuel burn drops below 7 gallons per hour. In our 172, I regularly see an average of around 6.5 gallons per hour. In a 4-cylinder engine, the firing interval is every 180 degrees of crankshaft rotation, with no overlap between power strokes. In a 6-cylinder engine, the firing interval is every 120 degrees, causing a slight overlap in power strokes, which results in smoother running. But this is not the only factor that makes the 6-cylinder boxer engine smoother running than a similarly sized 4-cylinder boxer engine. But first, it's important to clarify the difference between a flat engine that is a boxer and a flat engine that isn't a boxer. A horizontally opposed engine is the same as a flat engine, both terms referring to cylinders that are laid out 180 degrees apart. However, the term boxer specifically describes the movement of the opposed pistons. In a boxer engine, like the O-320, the pistons of opposed cylinders mirror each other's movement. This means the opposed pistons reach top dead center, mid-stroke, and bottom dead center at the same time. It's a common misconception that some of these engines share crank pins, like V engines do. On 4 and 6 cylinder engines, this configuration isn't practical due to primary balance issues. Primary imbalance occurs due to pistons' momentum as they change direction at top and bottom dead center. If opposed pistons shared a crank pin, this imbalance would double as the pistons in a non-boxer engine move in the same direction. The other two pistons would oppose this motion, but the equal, though not directly opposed forces create a twisting motion called a rocking couple, which produces too much vibration for practical use in production engines. In a flat 4 engine that is a boxer, like virtually all aviation horizontally opposed 4s and 6s, each piston has its own 180-degree offset crank pin and so cancels out the momentum of opposed pistons at top and bottom dead center. Don't worry, the relevance to the O-300 horizontally opposed 6 will become clear shortly. So, boxer engines have perfect balance, right? Not quite. The slight offset of the conrods means the pistons aren't perfectly opposed, resulting in a rocking couple on each pair. When two pistons are at top dead center with outward forces, the other two are at bottom dead center with inward forces. The rocking couple of the pistons at top and bottom dead center oppose each other, effectively cancelling out. While this does create a twisting force on the crankshaft, primary balance remains very good. But it's with secondary balance that the offset cylinders become a problem. While the magnitude of the secondary imbalance is typically much smaller than the primary imbalance, it is not weak enough to ignore. If you already know what causes the secondary imbalance and you don't want to sit through another explanation, feel free to skip to this time in the video. Secondary balance arises from the changing relative length of the conrod. At top and bottom dead center, the conrod is fully upright and at its longest. But at 90 degrees of crankshaft rotation, the conrod tilts, shortening its vertical length. As a result, when the conrod is at 90 degrees, the piston isn't exactly halfway down the cylinder, but is slightly lower. Since the crankshaft turns at a uniform speed, the piston accelerates more in the top half to cover the extra distance in the same time. The secondary imbalance occurs twice as frequently as the primary imbalance. At top and bottom dead center, when the conrod is upright, the force is directed upward, away from the crankshaft. But when the conrod tilts at mid-stroke, the secondary force points downward towards the crankshaft. In a boxer 4 like the O-320, at top dead center, the opposed pistons have upright conrods with forces opposing each other in both magnitude and direction. However, the slight misalignment of the conrods causes a rocking couple that tries to rotate the engine in this direction. The other two pistons at bottom dead center also create a rocking couple trying to rotate the engine in this direction. The problem becomes clear. Unlike primary balance, which create rocking couples in opposite directions, secondary balance create them in the same direction. This causes forces that continuously attempt to rotate the engine back and forth while running. The magnitude of this imbalance depends on the mass of the pistons and conrods that are accelerated non-uniformly. This is why larger boxer 4-aero engines like the 5.9-litre Lycoming O-360 are relatively rough-running engines. The 6-cylinder boxer engine is often said to be perfectly balanced. While it is nearly perfect, it is not quite vibration-free. This might seem like nitpicking, but many of you will find this interesting and informative. When the middle two pistons are at bottom dead center, with conrods fully upright, their secondary forces point away from the crankshaft. Since the conrods are not perfectly aligned, this creates a rocking couple. At the same time, the other four pistons have forces pointing toward the crankshaft, generating a twisting force in the opposite direction. However, since their conrods are not fully tilted, the imbalance is not at full strength, and the cumulative secondary forces from these four pistons cancel out the imbalance of the middle two pistons. However, the same is not true when it comes to the primary forces. For the middle pistons at bottom dead center, the offset primary imbalance force points toward the crankshaft. The outer four pistons don't have unresolved primary forces at this point, as they're near mid-stroke, not at top or bottom dead center. The offset primary forces of the middle pistons create a slight rocking couple, and this occurs every time a set of opposed pistons reaches top or bottom dead center. Another way to think of a Boxer 6 engine is as two mirrored inline 3 engines. An inline 3 has perfect secondary balance, but has a rocking couple due to primary imbalance. The two mirrored inline 3s oppose each other, so the total inward and outward forces cancel out. However, the slight offset between the opposed conrods prevents perfect opposition, causing a very slight rocking couple. So how significant is this imbalance? Due to the small moment arm, which is the distance the forces are offset, relative to the engine's length, the imbalance is small enough that the engine mount rubbers absorb most, if not all of it. As a result, the imbalance is barely noticeable inside the cockpit, enough so to convince most that the Boxer 6 is completely vibration-free. The difference in vibration between the Boxer 4 and Boxer 6 is quite noticeable. Just ask any Cessna 170 owner who upgraded from the O-300 Boxer 6 to the O-320 or O-360 Boxer 4. The difference in vibration is like night and day.
RPM's good. Airspeed's alive.
Much like this one, many O-300s remain in use today, 77 years after its inception. While these engines were by no means the most powerful or efficient, their widespread use, smooth running, reliability, and enjoyable operation have made them an important part of general aviation history. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.